Hello, Richard Callahan, Creekside Realty, real estate broker in Silicon Valley for the past 40 years. We're here to talk about Silicon Valley real estate market geographically, graphically, and in table forms. And then we'll finish up with the Greater Bay Area, which encompasses 5 regions, including 13 counties in the Northern California. This is week number 51. We'll get to the URLs at the end. These are the data slides that we'll be going over. There is a lot of different data slides. If you're a repeat visitor, you might want to jump to the first data slide. For those that are joining for the first time, my data is unusual in several ways. I talk about the number of offers accepted versus the pendings. The huge reason for that is the length of pendings changes, and that impacts the data. I think the number of offers accepted is far more important than the number of pendings. With that, let's get into the data. Here's the first heat map. What we're doing here is we're looking at the active inventory today compared to where it normally is at this same week compared to the previous 10 years. We're taking the inventory today, comparing it to the 10-year median for the same week. When it's red, that means you have a lack of inventory because a lack of inventory favors the seller, less homes from the buyers to pick from. Blue favors the buyer because there's more homes than normal to pick from. And you can see the ranges are basically 60% in Alameda County, and I only have county-wide data for the first 3 slides in Alameda. And then in San Mateo County, you got a range from 2/3 in Foster City, but that's a real small area. So if we eliminate that, which I think is the fairest thing, you go from 97% to 124%. In Santa Clara County, the range is quite a bit larger. You're going from 77% down in South County, all the way up to 167% in Los Altos, Palo Alto area. Basically, both San Mateo and Santa Clara County are right around 100%. We have right about the normal level of inventory you'd expect, but in large part, that's because of the huge decrease in inventory right at the end of the year, and it's a very sharp drop. Now we're flipping over and looking at offers. Here, a low number of offers favors the buyer because there's less competition. And you can see all 3 counties are favoring the buyer right now, but that's just a lack of volume. So there's just not a lot of transactions happening. A lot of people have been arguing that's because of the lack of inventory, but that's not the case because the speed of the market, the turn of the marketplace is slower than it has been. So the market's capable of selling more homes than it is selling based on recent past performance. In Santa Clara County, you can see that we go from about 50% of the inventory you'd expect in the affordable areas up to 102% in Cupertino, Sunnyvale. San Mateo County goes from a low of 23% of the offers. So that's only 1/4 the number of offers you'd expect to have along the San Mateo County coast, all the way up to 101% in Redwood City. In Alameda County, I only have system county-wide data, so that's 69%. The third and last one where we're comparing to the 10-year median is the days of unsold inventory. So this is the speed of the marketplace. Basically, Santa Clara County and San Mateo County are quite a bit slower than normal. The fastest you have, again, is Foster City, very small market area. So let's cross that out. And now let's look at the rest. South County is at 101. That's the fastest or the most normal marketplace. Right now, South County is only 1.5% slower than it normally is. You jump into the affordable areas and it's 95%. It's almost twice as slow as it normally is. You jump up into Los Altos and Palo Alto, and it's a little bit more than twice as slow as it normally is. And if you go over to the San Mateo County coast, you're almost 4 times slower than it normally is, or 1/4 the speed. So you can see that in general, there is quite a range, but it's going from typical to 4 times slower than typical, or 1/4 the speed that you'd expect to see at this time of the year. And now we're going to disregard all that, and we're not going to look at the inventory or the number of offers. And the reason we're not going to do that is it's going to vary dramatically based on the geographical size of the micro markets. And the micro markets were selected not to have uniform size, but were selected for the marketing conditions of the homes. So the first slide that we're looking at, just the raw data on, is the days of unsold inventory. And we can do that because it's simply the ratio between the available inventory and the number of offers accepted in the past 5 weeks. Because that's a ratio, then the DUI should be the same if the market conditions are the same. And in Santa Clara County, you can see you go from a fast of 21 days in the moderate or affordable areas of Santa Clara, Willow Glen, Campbell, and Cambrian to a slow area in the expensive areas of Los Altos and Palo Alto and Saratoga Los Gatos being on top for the slowest at 67 days. It's going to take basically 60 some days average for those two areas, 56 to 67 days to sell homes in the expensive areas. But on the inexpensive areas, it's 53 days. The areas that are doing the fastest are the heart of Silicon Valley, basically at 3 weeks, 21 days to 24 days to sell out all your existing inventory. You go up into San Mateo County, and again, ignoring Foster City at 10 days, you're going from a low of 26 days to a high of 236 days. It's taking 9 months to sell homes on the coast right at the moment. Clearly a very different marketplace than we're seeing over here in the Silicon Valley. And then if you go into Alameda County, I now have the micro market data, and you can see you go from a fast of 18 days in Fremont to a slow of 63 days in Oakland. Ignoring Oakland, the next slowest is 31 days in Pleasanton. And then after that, it comes in pretty quickly. The faster areas have the red color, and the slower areas have the blue color. White color is basically a balanced marketplace. For those that want a very simple benchmark, this is how long is it taking the 75th percentile to sell their home. And that means that 75% of the sellers that are successful in selling their home are selling it in the time listed here. Basically, I consider from under 3 weeks to be a very strong seller's marketplace, from 3 weeks to 7 weeks a balanced marketplace, and above 7 weeks to be a buyer's marketplace. And the real standout in my eyes is the San Mateo County coast here at 35 days. If we go back and you see that it would take 236 days to sell out the existing inventory, but those sellers that are successful are selling in 35 days. So that says that even if you are in a slow marketplace and you price your home correctly, your home will sell quickly. That also suggests that there's a lot of sellers on the coast that are selling their house that aren't successful in selling, because the inventory that's on the market trying to sell that doesn't sell does impact days of unsold inventory, but does not impact the days on market 75th percentile, because it's only looking at the percent of the people on the marketplace. What I would need to be looking at to count that is I need to be looking at how many days on the market of the current properties. But that's a harder thing to do because a lot of listings are only 90 days. So even though a house might be on for a succession of 90 days, the days on market for that particular listing would not exceed 90. Now you're looking at ask price adjustments, and this is average. So this is where you put everybody in the micro market area in a blender, and how much did they reduce their price? And these numbers are fairly close together. And I do plan on spreading them out a little bit more now that I've had this metric for a while. But it's close together because a vast majority of the sellers do their homework before they put their house on the marketplace and don't do any price reductions whatsoever. And therefore, there would be a zero. And when you average a zero in with someone that's taking a 10% price reduction, you get numbers like 1%. And that's basically in a high level what we're seeing here. This is the average of all the homes in South County are only 1.2% price reductions. Now we're looking at the frequency of the price reduction. So how common is it for a seller to take a price reduction in those different areas? And you can see in South County, 1 in 5, 1 in 12 in Cupertino. Then you come up into San Mateo County and you're basically, maybe overall 1 in 3 sellers are taking a price reduction. We have areas on the coast where every other seller is taking a price reduction. Foster City, even though it was a fast moving area, 43% of the sellers were doing price reductions, and that may be why it's fast moving. You go over into Alameda County, we got 3 areas right at 13% of the sellers are doing a price reduction. So that's about 1 in 7 sellers are doing a price reduction. Here is the magnitude of overbidding. We were looking at what the sellers were doing to get the offers in. Now we're flipping over and looking at what the buyers are doing when they go in and write up their offer. You can see in San Mateo County, there's two areas where the buyers are offering 2% below the asking price. And then you can see that the rest of the areas are at or above asking price. In Santa Clara County, you go from 1.3% in South County to 6.3% in Cupertino. But if we eliminate Cupertino and South County, the extremes, you're basically going from 2 to 4%, a fairly tight range. You go up into San Mateo County, and since you have two at negative 2%, you're basically going from 2% up to 2.4%. So a 4% range on both sides of 100%. You go up into Alameda County, and it looks like you go from 2.3% up to 8.4 if you throw out the two extremes. You can see that Alameda County has a wider range of the amount of overbidding that's going on. Here's the frequency of overbidding. So how common is overbidding? Santa Clara County, you're probably right around 50%. You got a couple a little bit under, you got a couple areas a little bit above. You're probably slightly higher than 50% if you weighted everybody evenly. In San Mateo County, you're probably somewhere around 40%, definitely a little bit slower. And then in Alameda County, you're probably somewhere right around 60%. So I think Alameda County comes in as the fastest of the three counties. You can sort of see that because all of Alameda County is a shade of pink, where in Santa Clara County, you have some white areas, and you have fainter paint of pink here. And then clearly in San Mateo County, it's mostly white with a hint of blue right here in the expensive areas, and then also a hint of red up in the North San Mateo County cities. Moving on to appreciation. This is looking back longer in time. I took the last 9 months of 2015, and I'm comparing that median price. So it's a fairly stable price. And I picked those 9 months because the market was stable during that period of time. Come forward to now, and where's the appreciation? Santa Clara County is right around 77% appreciation. Yeah, there's some areas. The slowest area I'm seeing is Los Altos and Palo Alto at only 16% appreciation. Saratoga Las Gatos at 50% appreciation. You go into San Mateo County, and the bulk of those areas are right around 50%. The Bay City, surprisingly, is only at 22% appreciation. And then you go over into Alameda County, and you basically are 2/3 to 70% appreciation. You do have Union City and Newark at 80% appreciation. Here is the price range, and instead of following just the median price as most people do, which is the middle number, I also sandwich it. What's the lowest price you're likely to find in the area, which is defined as the 10 percentile pricing? And that in South County is $860,000. The median is obviously the 50 percentile, and the 90 percentile is the most expensive you'd expect. Basically, all your homes in South County are in a $1 million range from 860,000 to 1.8 million, just under a $1 million range. So you can do that in each area. You can rapidly find out what areas you're likely to find a home. And if you look at $1 million, you can look up and down here and see your options are basically South County and East San Jose. You might be able to find one in Milpitas, North Valley, Berryessa, but there's only 10% of the homes under 1.1 million, and to get all the way down to 1 million is pretty tough. You go up into San Mateo County, and Redwood City would be your only option, it looks like. And then if you go down into Alameda County, you have the option of Livermore, Union City, Newark, San Leandro, Hayward, San Lorenzo, Oakland, and Berkeley. Here's a summary of the data we went over. You can start over here on the left area and pick the micro market area you're interested in, see what the conditions and the price are. Or if you know your affordability from meeting with a lender, either on a payment basis, the furthest right column, or a price point, you can then go back and look at what the columns are. You can also see the areas quickly that have had the highest appreciation right through here. Again, red is not associated with this favoring the buyers or the sellers, but simply which areas have had the hottest, the most appreciation. And then the price point and the payment color is the same. And that's why I only have one color range for those two items. Now what we're doing is we're looking at all of Silicon Valley in a blender, and we're seeing what it's doing overall. We're comparing it to the 10-year median. Inventory right now for Silicon Valley is 80% of the inventory you'd expect to have. So even though we nosedive for the holidays and it's been climbing recently, although the last 2 weeks it's gone down, we're still 80%. We have less inventory than we normally do. Then you flip down to the number of offers, and it's almost the same number, 77% versus 79%. This is the number of offers, so slightly less number of offers than you would expect to have. This is something I've struggled with myself for quite a while. I'm looking at these three things independently. So typically, if your inventory is 79% of where you'd expect it to be, and sales are 77% of where you'd expect it to be, you'd expect more days of unsold inventory than normal. But they're done independently, and your median inventory, your median number of sales, and your median DUI don't necessarily occur in the same year. That's why this number isn't slightly above 100%, which is what you'd expect if you simply did a ratio of 79% over 77%. And I find that really confusing, but it's because your inventory and your sales are coming from different years, your median, and your DUI can be from yet a third year. So with that confusion, we'll move on. The purpose of this slide is to show, for a lack of a number of offers, basically the deeper blue is the record low. In the middle part of 2023, we were having the least number of offers in the past 25 years. Then we came up and we had the pale blue, and that's the second least that you'd expect. And right now we're oscillating back and forth. As early as back on November 8th, we had the worst. Then we had 4 weeks of the second worst. Now we've had 2 weeks of the worst, and the current week is the second worst. I will point out that this week, the 1124 will probably drop below the 1106 when transactions start failing. I believe just last week, this 1254 was higher than 1268 because the number of transactions that fell through. But if you come over here, you can quickly see, the best we've done this year is 23rd out of 25 past years. And most of the year has been at 25, 24, and now we're back to 24 and 25. We clearly still have a very limited number of sales going on, number of offers going on. And if you look at just the past 10 years, figuring, what happened 15 years ago and 20 years ago and 25 years ago is more irrelevant. You can see that we've had the 9th or the 10th slowest year out of the last 10. Here is looking at the payments. I'm going to point out that, a lot of people are really focused on the interest rates. But if we look at this, here's 2022, which was before we really had the run up in interest rates. And the payments are roughly the same order of magnitude. For the bulk of 2022, I would have said you were at $10,000 for your PITI payment for the median priced home in Silicon Valley, maybe a little bit above, but not significantly above. Now you're only at $1,100. So you've only gone up $1,000 on your monthly payment. That's a 10% increase. It's really not that big of an increase. And you can do the same at the expensive areas. You were at about 20,000, maybe 21,000, and now you're at 22,000. You come down here to the low end, and you're clearly above 5,000. I don't know what the exact number is. I might say it's 5,075, and now you're at 6,421. So you've only gone up 675. Your payments have gone up. Basically, if I go rough numbers, and if I'm remembering correctly, your payments are roughly 10% higher than they were in 2022. Now, if you go back to 2021, it's a little bit more of an increase, but it's not like a doubling of the payments. And that's because a couple things happen. Your mortgage, your homeowner's insurance is a more or less a fixed dollar amount. It doesn't go up with the price of the homes. It goes up with construction costs. Your property tax are based on what your purchase price is, not what the interest rates are. And lastly, something that a lot of people don't take into consideration, as your interest rate goes up, the amount of principal you pay each month goes down. So your payment is more stable. Just your PI payment is more stable than the interest rate. Now what we're doing is something that I haven't seen anybody else do. We're looking at the ask price reductions. Each line on here is a weekly distribution. And this is basically a year ago, the dotted line, and that corresponds to basically the worst week we have. And then each time the graph flashes and you see the bold line move, that is 4 or 5 weeks closer to the present day. And then when we get to 3 months, 13 weeks back, we change over and go weekly. So here we go 11 months ago. You can see the run up that we have, and that's what we're about ready to see. Then it comes down with a little fluctuation, but it just generally migrates down. So that's what happens basically in the valley. You have a huge run up and then a down, and you can see the current cooling off, and it's already gone up a little bit. Let's just go back. There looks like about the bottom, and now the purple and the green are where we are today. We're actually a little bit above the bottom, and that tends to happen when the activity that starts off in 2024 gets pulled into 2023, and that does happen. And I almost suspect that's what's happening right now. Now we're flipping over and seeing what's doing the same concept. Each line is a distribution. We're starting a year ago, but now we're looking at what the buyer does when he comes in with the overbid. And here the movement is as dramatic and it's more stable. So you can see you're climbing, and now you're sort of at a long plateau. And sorry about the background moving around, but you have a long plateau, and now you can see you've been working downwards. The disadvantage of looking at the overbids is we have to wait for escrows to close to get to that number. So it's a lagging indicator. It's telling us what the market conditions were 5 weeks ago. And I'll also point out, anytime you see a date in the future, 12/27/2023 hasn't gotten here yet. That's how I'm displaying the data from last night at midnight. December 20th, it's Wednesday morning. So this is data through Tuesday night of this past week. But since I want to give you the most currently available data I can, I bring that forward by showing it on the 27th, which is data really through last night at midnight, reported today on the 23rd. When it's in the future, you just go back to Friday. So that would be actual data for the 22nd. I just don't want to, and I date it on the day I report the data. Here's active inventory. This graph is looking at all of Silicon Valley. That's the purple line. The red line is the least inventory you'd expect. The gray line is the inventory you'd actually expect if you were having the median year, the typical year for the past 10 years. And the blue line is the most inventory you'd expect to have. The huge takeaway is look how much of a cycle there is every year on this data. It repeats itself. Current data is basically the least you'd expect is 973 listings in all of Silicon Valley, and right now we have 1,014. We have basically 40 more listings than you'd expect to have. Looking at the number of offers you'd expect, it's the exact same thing, but now a low number of offers is a cool marketplace, and that's why the order of the red and the blue have flipped. A blue is always a slow marketplace favoring the buyers, and high inventory would favor the buyer, low offers favors the buyer, and that's why the order of the red and the blue have interchanged. But here you're at 1124, and the lowest you'd expect is 1124. So we're basically have the least inventory you'd expect. Now, that doesn't mean this is the record low. In fact, it isn't, because when you're looking at the 10 percentile, there's going to be the 0 percentile, the minimum, that's worse. And when you're looking at 10 years, that's basically 1 year with lower, and that's basically right here. Now, if you look at this quickly, you might say, well, this line here looks lower, and this line here is definitely lower. But you got to remember, we're still before the end of the year, so you're somewhere up here on the slope before the line. Each bold line vertical is January 1st, and we're only at the end of December, and that's why the data is, saying it's the second least you'd expect. And now we move on to Silicon Valley unsold inventory. This is just how quickly the market is. Typical is 34. You can see we're at 32, very typical marketplace. You can see we were faster than the typical marketplace earlier this year in 2023. And then you can see that we actually got a little bit on the slower side. Right now, we happen to be on the faster side, but 32 days, 34 days, I don't think anyone's going to notice that difference. Here's looking at DUI versus typical, and you can see that we're at 94% of the days on sold inventory you'd expect. So you're a little faster, and that's why the red line is down at the bottom here. Basically, I'm taking these curvy lines and straightening them out and saying, are you above or below? Here you're above, and that's where you'd expect it to be. And you can see, yes, we're above. Right now, we're slightly below. Remember, we were, what, 32 days versus 34 days. Now we're looking at that 75th percentile. So this is a little less confusing maybe to look at. It's simply, of the sellers that are successfully selling, how many days does it take them to sell? Now, we saw in the San Mateo County coast where the 75th percentile was something like 35 and the days on market was something like 235, which is a huge discrepancy. The biggest explanation I have without having investigated it is, in the days on sold inventory at 235, you're including the houses that don't sell. But on the days on market, you're only including the sellers that were successful. So it's a different data set, and that's how you can have such widely different numbers. Here, your 75th percentile of successful sellers is 26 days, which is quite a bit faster than 36 that you would typically expect to have at this time of the year, but it is slower than the 20 that you would expect in a red hot seller's marketplace. Yeah, here you are at 71%, 72% of where you'd typically expect it to be. Here's your ask price reduction. So how much are the sellers taking a price reduction? They're receiving 98.6%, so the price reduction is 1.4%. You'd expect it to be 1%. Sellers are taking a little bit bigger price reductions right now than they typically would. Here's looking at the sellers that take the biggest price reduction. So again, very similar metric, but different. We're looking at the 10% of the sellers that took the biggest price reduction. How big was that price reduction? And you can see in this particular case, those sellers are only getting 85% of their asking price, or in other words, they took a 15% price reduction. The biggest price reduction you'd expect them to take is 16.2%. We're only 1.2% away from that biggest price reduction. Typically, you'd only expect to be taking 88% price reduction. And this is maybe a little shocking to a lot of people that haven't looked at the data before. To see that 10% of the sellers are taking a 10% or 9.5% price reduction in a hot marketplace is hard to understand. But those are the ones that misjudged the marketplace, were testing the marketplace to see if they could get an over marketplace, over value. And that's one thing in general, it's very difficult to get more than the property's worth. The easiest way to get more than the property is worth is to get someone emotionally involved in the property somehow, which is why staging is so important in this day and age. Get 2 or 3 people that think they really want the house, and then someone that has money that doesn't want to lose the house is willing to pay more than they know it's worth to get what they want because they have the wherewithal to do so. On the flip side, and what it's really saying is, even in a good hot seller favored marketplace, there are 10% of the sellers that are doing almost a 10% price reduction, which I don't think a lot of people would realize. Turns out 10% is hard to find, because when you put in your criteria, you're looking at the masses, you're not looking at that 10%. You're not chasing the seller that's going to take the biggest price reduction, you're chasing the house that meets your family's needs. Now we're looking at that price reduction. You can see it's 29% more than normal. You can see it's been more than normal for all of fourth quarter of this year. Here's the frequency of ask price reduction. So how common is ask price? We're basically right at typical. Typical is 19.7%. We're at 20%, 20.3%. So it's half a percentage more sellers are doing a price reduction than typical. The most you'd expect the sellers to do is 1/3 of the sellers to do a price reduction. And the least you'd expect to do down here is that 10% of the sellers, which is why I elected to look at the 10% benchmark on this instead of the quadrant. Quadrants are used a lot in statistics, and I'm using the quadrant for days on marketplace, although I am thinking of changing that potentially to 90 percentile to get a bigger range. But, here you can see there is some logic on why I took 10%, because I don't want a lot of sellers not taking any price reduction at all, forcing my price reduction amount to zero or closer to zero than it should be. Here's the frequency compared to typical. So the frequency a little bit more than the normal number of sellers are taking price reductions right now. Here's the average overbid. So now we're leaving the sellers behind and going, what are the buyers doing? And typically at this year, the buyers are paying 3.7% above the asking price. Right now, they're paying 4.1% above the market price. And again, I want to point out that this requires the sale price. So this is a lagging indicator. It's where the market was 5 weeks ago. In a hot marketplace, they're paying 8.7% above the marketplace. And in a cool marketplace, they're still overbidding by 1.6%. And that just shows how tight the real estate marketplace is in Silicon Valley for buyers to overbid willingly in a marketplace that is slow. Here's the frequency of overbidding, and part of the reason they're willing to overbid is almost 50% of the sellers, 46%, 45.6% to be precise, are getting overbids on a cool marketplace. Right now we're at 57.9%. Typical is 56.8, so very close. And I think this is almost a little bizarre, but it shows you why you want to look at a lot of different metrics. Is you're having slightly more sellers get an overbid now. We're getting a little bit more overbidding at 4.1% versus 3.7%. And then we're getting a little bit more frequency of overbidding. So those are consistent. They don't have to be. You could have fewer sellers with a higher amount of overbid. It all depends on where the bell-shaped curve is falling and the shape of the bell shape. And that might actually be something interesting to look at. And that's sort of what the overbid diagrams do, is it lets you start looking at the distribution. Here's the median sold price for Silicon Valley. So the 3 counties are Santa Clara County, San Mateo County, and Alameda County in a blender. And you can see we've come down quite a bit in the last couple of weeks. But notice that you do that basically even here in a very strong year. It dipped down more of a U-shaped here. You're seeing the V in 9 out of the last 10 years, and the 1 year you don't see it, there's still a dip. It's more of a U dip. So to see a V here dip is very normal, which is why I put it like, the straight line to sort of give you the anticipation of where the price would be based on uniform appreciation. It's not a prediction, it's just uniform appreciation. Now what we're doing is looking at the inventory for the 3 counties that make up Silicon Valley. This is the individual counties. You can see that San Mateo County has the least inventory, but it's the smallest county, and that's why it has the least inventory. You can see that Santa Clara County is next at 356, and Alameda County has the most inventory at 444. And if you just go back and look at this graph, that's basically what we've had long term, where the Alameda County is slightly higher than Santa Clara County. I should look at the population because I think Santa Clara County has a little bit more population than Alameda County. Just off the top of my head, I think Santa Clara is right at 2 million, and I think Alameda County is at 1.6, but that's from a weak memory. I'll try to look into that for next week. Now we're looking at the number of offers accepted, and you can see that Alameda County is actually a little bit below Santa Clara County. And if you go back and look, Alameda County is normally above Santa Clara County. So that's a noteworthy shift. And San Mateo County is the smallest area and therefore in a different league, and you can't compare. And that's why I do the 10-year median so you can see whether the inventory is higher than lower, because this 218 has no bearing on the 440 and the 466 because they're different size communities. The only reason I can compare the 440 and the 466 is you can look back over time and you can see they're roughly the same. And if you do the same with San Mateo County, you can see San Mateo County is roughly half the size of Santa Clara County and Alameda County. And here, this 218 is roughly half the size of the 440 and the 466. And that's why you got to do a ratio to the itself and not to an absolute number. Now, again, I've said this before, days unsold inventory, you can look at raw count because you're doing a ratio between the active listings for that area and the active number of offers accepted. Santa Clara County is the fastest at 26. San Mateo County is sort of surprising right at the moment, coming in second place at 34. and Alameda County is at 35. You can see that San Mateo County was the slowest for most of 2023. Time on the marketplace, San Mateo County is the slowest at 47. Alameda County is in second place, and Santa Clara County is in third. The time on the marketplace is sort of a lagging indicator. Days of unsold inventory shifts more rapidly. This is sort of an average of where it's been, and that's true. Alameda County has been in second place, even though right now it's in third place. Here's the magnitude of price reductions that the sellers are doing. The biggest price reductions are 2% in San Mateo County. And again, this is everybody in the blender. So that 2% is either 20% of the sellers taking a 10% price reduction, or 10% of the sellers doing a 20% price reduction. And it's probably somewhere in between. So 15% of the sellers are doing a 15% price reduction potentially. Alameda County is at 60 at 98.4 or 1.6% of price reductions. And Santa Clara County is doing the best at 99% or a 1% reduction. And you can see that Alameda County has come down dramatically just in the last week. That could just be a statistical fluctuation. Now we're looking at ask price reductions frequency. So how common are the price reductions? This is the number of the sellers that are taking price reductions, not the magnitude. In Santa Clara County, you have 17% of the sellers doing a price reduction. And that's basically 1 in 6 sellers are doing a price reduction, because 6 times 17 is 102%. In Alameda County, it's 20% or 1 in 5. And in San Mateo County, it's 28% or a little bit more frequent than 1 in 4 sellers are doing a price reduction. And at the 20%, it turns out to be the number that's color-coded to the line and also showing the decimal point, which is why I know it's this 20% with the 0.2 instead of the 20% that's just without a decimal point. And actually, that's a good question. Looking for feedback. Do you like having the axis numbers on both sides? So you got the 25% over here as well as over here. But since the right-hand side of the graph is the current, I'm thinking of adding the axis numbers on the right-hand side as well as the actual data points. If anyone wants to give me feedback, if they'd like to see that, it's a fairly simple change. Because here you can see I have the raw numbers, but I don't have the axes. So I'm thinking of bringing over the axes so you don't have to come over here to see that this is 110%. It may confuse people, and that's why I haven't done it so far, but that was one graph that I have it that way. Now what we're doing is looking at the magnitude of overbidding. We're looking at what the buyers are doing. And the area that has the most overbidding is Alameda County. Even though it's slowing down right at the moment and was in second place in some criteria, it's clearly the leader in the buyers overbidding. Right now at almost 6% over asking price. Santa Clara County is at 3.5% over the seller's asking price. And even though San Mateo County is by far the slowest marketplace, they're still getting 2% above the seller's asking price on average. This is the frequency of overbidding. San Mateo County is at almost 50%, 46% of the sellers are getting more than their asking price. You can see that's come down quite a bit in the last couple of weeks. Santa Clara County is at 58%. It's actually gone up the last couple of weeks. And Alameda County is at 63%, again, the strongest of the 3 counties. And again, this is lagging behind the data by 5 weeks. And this may have been when Alameda County was in first place and not when it's in second place. I think San Mateo County was outbidding it recently. This is the appreciation. Santa Clara County has the most appreciation at 77% since 2015. Alameda County is second at 62%, and coming in third as 46% is San Mateo County. Here's the prices currently, and I will point out that San Mateo County is one of those rare moments where it's below Santa Clara County. It's only $25,000, but for it to be below is pretty unusual. You can see that the orange, San Mateo County, has been on top of the blue, and in some cases by a fairly significant amount. And right now it's actually below by 25,000. And Alameda County is down here at 12,000. This also shows more graphically why San Mateo County and I think it was San Francisco and San Mateo counties have the most sellers that are upside down. The blue line, if you look at the blue line to the blue peak line, there's only a little area here and a little tiny little area here. Basically, the only area where prices where sellers would have bought would get less now is here in 2022 and here in 2023, where in San Mateo County, it's just all of 2023, basically just, the one little exception is this little valley down, and all of 2022 and all of 2021, and even some of peak pricing in 2020. And I could almost argue that the peak price comes back here to 2019. So there's a lot of time periods where the median sold price in San Mateo County was higher than it is right now. And if you're looking at what they could get for their house right now, and if the median price reflects the market value, that tells the whole story. And this is the same graph on regular paper for those that prefer. And here's the payments. And since San Mateo County is cheaper, the payment's a little bit lower. So Alameda County at $9,000 a month in payments, Santa Clara and San Mateo County somewhere in the mid 12,500, 12,800. Here's the actual data for the three counties individually, as well as the whole valley. You can see that Silicon Valley's seen a 14.6% drop in new listings. You can see that San Mateo County has seen the least amount of drop, but still it's 12.4. The biggest drop was in Alameda County at 15.5%. That's just because we're going into a holiday weekend, a major holiday weekend, and a lot of sellers aren't going to want to list their property coming into a holiday weekend. Now we're leaving behind Silicon Valley, and we're going to talk about the Greater Bay Area. Silicon Valley is one of 5 regions, along with the cities, North Bay, Central Valley, and Central Coast. Here are the numbers, so sort of the reverse order. And I will point out here that Santa Clara County has the highest median at 1,700,000. San Mateo County is third, so second place is Marin at 1,690. We're even outperforming on price right now, Marin County, and I don't think that's ever happened before. And so Marin is in second, and San Mateo County is in third place. Here's the inventory. You can see that all the regions are dropping. I think it's noteworthy that even though Central Coast is dropping, it drops the least steep. You can sort of see it goes into a gradual end of the year turn, where Silicon Valley, I think, has sort of the sharpest V, followed by the North Bay and then the Central Valley. So it's just interesting to see the shapes of the V's varying. Even San Mateo County has a broader V. Silicon Valley probably has the tightest V. I guess what I could do is change the scale on them and put them on top of one another, do a ratio. That might be interesting to actually see that. Here's your number of offers that you expect. You can see that dips way down and has a very sharp V. Here you can see the 3 regions being Silicon Valley, Central Valley, and North Bay, the sort of the 3 hubs of Silicon Valley that are the same size. The V shape is very, very similar on the number of offers. I would almost think that San Francisco, Marin, the cities, is a little bit less shallow, but almost as steep. And the Central Coast is a pretty steep V. So the V on the number of offers appears to be more similar than the V in the number of inventory. Here's days on marketplace for the 5 regions. You can see Silicon Valley is doing the best. You can see the Central Coast is doing the least well at 77 days. The other 3 regions are fairly close together, from 41 days to 45. The numbers are color-coded towards the area. You got the cities down here in 41, you got the North Bay at 45, and you got the Central Valley at 49. Here's days on marketplace for the 75th percentile. Different order, completely, because here's Central Coast is at 52. It's in third place, the third best instead of the worst. And in worst place here is San Francisco Marin, 58 days. You got to be careful, make sure you understand the metric that you're looking at. And I think that's one of the big problems I see in the media. They're reporting on metrics that they don't understand. Here's the ask price reductions. The cities has the most price reductions at 4%. Silicon Valley has the least at 1.4%. Here's the frequency of price reductions. Silicon Valley, the least at 1 out of 5 sellers are doing price reductions. Central Coast is second at 1 out of 3. And the worst is the cities at 1 and 2.5 sellers. 40% of the sellers are doing price reductions. This is what the overbid is. Silicon Valley has the highest overbid at 4%. Cities, North Bay, Central Valley at under 100%, and Central Coast at 1.2% below their asking price. Here's the frequency of overbidding. Silicon Valley has the most overbidding. Cities, North Bay, Central Valley, and Central Coast at only 32% of the sellers getting more than their asking price. Here's the total appreciation. The cities has done the worst at 34% appreciation. Central Valley has done the best at 81% appreciation. Silicon Valley is at second best at 67%. Central Coast at 61, and North Bay at 57%. So this is the median price. So here your San Francisco Marin is higher because Silicon Valley is pulled down by Alameda County. I think if I remember correctly, Alameda County is at 1.2 million. So if the others are at 1.7 or 1.2 pulls it down, that's one of the drawbacks when you start combining things. Then you have the Central Coast at 1 million even, North Bay at 750,000, and Central Valley at 525,000. Here's the payments, and again, you can go back and see that the payments now in the Central Valley are basically where they were in 2022 at the peaks, and below what they were for most of 2023. Same with North Bay. Central Coast were lower payments than we were for most of 2023, but still higher than we were for most of 2022. Silicon Valley is higher than we were for all of 2022, and the San Francisco cities, it had a little bit area here where the payments were higher, but I think that was based on higher prices versus anything else. And with that, we come to the end. We've been talking about week number 51. You can get to the archives of this by typing in the YouTube link, or if you want to do less typing, the green URL, which I call my root URL. If you add in 2023, you get to the live presentation Saturday morning at 9 a.m. If you add in the letter H, the year, month, date code, so H 2023, 12/23, you get the handout. It's 58 pages. It's basically every slide we went over except for the moving movies on the distribution. I only give you the current one on that. And if you want any particular episode, you can either go to the archives up here or you can type it in directly. So with that, I'm open for any questions. I'm not seeing any unmuted mics. I'll call it a week. Thanks for joining me. Take care. See you next week. Bye for now.